Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program. As mentioned tonight, our guest is Dr. Jeffrey Holmes, author of the new book, Accessible College, A Guide to Transition Students with Disability from High School to College. Dr. Holmes is recognized as an expert practitioner in access, opportunity, and equity program development for students attending post-secondary institutions. He served 17 years in post-secondary education. He's mentored thousands of students to transition to college, degree completion, and careers. Via Skype, he's with us on the program today. Dr. Holmes, welcome to This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the show.
Hello, thank you. Great to be here.
We've got a lot to cover during the course of the program today. A lot of great information available in your book, Accessible College, available at Amazon, and the website is diversitytrainingconsultants.com. First of all, let's talk about the disabilities and the abilities that you talk about in the book.
Yes, well, one of the things is we have to refocus our thinking. For so many years, there has been language and talk that, put individual disabilities in a particular category or a box as if they can't do something. What we like to do is focus more on the abilities of what they can do and focus on achievements therein.
The book is called Accessible College, A Guide to Transition Students with Disability from High School to College. What exactly is an accessible college? For some of us that are looking from the outside, we'd almost think, geez, with all the rules and the regulations out there, every college, I would think, would need to be accessible. What exactly is an accessible college?
That's quite interesting. You would think that with all legislation that has passed
Yes.
since the early 70s, all the way through the 1990s with the reauthorization of the American with Disabilities Act, that every college, is okay and equally accessible for all students with disabilities. But unfortunately, that's really not the case. There are many campuses that still have classrooms that are inaccessible to wheelchair users and walkers and canes. There are still many classes and lectures that are inaccessible to students that are blind. There are still many educational videos that are still not fully captioned to allow students with the deaf or hard of hearing abilities to access the curriculum through video. So we still have a number of things to go. Although there are improvements, as far as, some things are Braille, alternative print. We now have accessible technology. We have accessible technology labs in many of our campuses around the country. But we still have a little ways to go in terms of making more of a universal design for all. As technology improves, though, these features will become more and more accessible to all students, not just those with disabilities.
Dr. Jeffrey Holmes, our guest on This Week in America. The book is Accessible College, A Guide to Transition Students with Disability from High School to College. His website is diversitytrainingconsultants.com. Book is available at Amazon, and of course, information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. If I am a student with a disability preparing for college, or if I'm a parent in that situation where I have a son or a daughter that I'm getting ready to look into college, is it safe for me to assume automatically, because I know what my legal rights are in high school and I'm going to a school that fulfills those, do those necessarily transition to all the colleges?
Yeah, those do not, and that's one of the things what kind of prompted me to do the book. I've been in this industry for years, and what we're finding is that the students with disabling conditions have to take special care on the front end to ensure they have accommodations on the back end when they get into college. Unfortunately, it is not a smooth and seamless transition as one would think. For students that don't experience disabling conditions, they can easily, go to a website, log on to a website, fill out an application, have their classes printed out, and then show up for class the first day of class, whatever that is at that particular college. For students who require accommodations, it is not such a seamless process, because if a student, for example, needs alternative text or Braille, or they need an interpreter in the classroom, or some other auxiliary aid, perhaps somebody to help them escort or navigate around the campus around barriers such as trees or fire hydrants or park benches or even club tables. Those kind of things are kind of taken for granted, on those first opening days of class. And a student would have to kind of prep themselves to be in a position to be a success for that first day of class, just so they can at least make it to the admissions office, make it to the restroom, and then let alone make it to their classroom. So those are types of things they have to do in advance, kind of notify an office to let them know, hey, my name is such and such, and, I have a condition that doesn't allow me to do the following, and I'm going to need an accommodation. And usually there are many offices. In fact, every campus at least has one person designated as the ADA coordinator on the college campus, which will take a high school file or take some information from the student that has the disabling condition and assist them with the types of accommodations they would receive or are used to receiving in high school.
One of the
However,
things,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. One of the things that was so helpful in the book Accessible College is you have the checklist there. So all the things that you're talking about, you don't have to sort of remember those. I mean, you put those pretty much in chronological order. What we need to do to prepare, and actually you've got us starting pretty early. You've got some things we need to start doing in middle school to prepare for college.
Yes, usually typically by the eighth grade or by 13, let's say 13 through 15 years old, um, most students who have disabling conditions have already been identified with the type of condition they have. Now, over the years, though, from those grades 9 through 12, what the student is really doing besides learning the curriculum is also learning and understanding how they learn in an educational setting. So they're also developing these other skill sets on how they learn and best cope in this academic environment. And once they have a handle on that, there's a certain prescribed checklist that they do each year, and then that gets them to the point where they become more dependent. They typically tend to be more successful, and they have a great first year of college.
The book is called Accessible College, A Guide to Transition Students to Disability from High School to College, with disability from high school to college. Dr. Jeffrey Holmes, our guest on the program, his website, diversitytrainingconsultants.com. It's very clear text. It gives you, as I mentioned, a lot of the guides that you need to go through. It gives you a timeline on some of these. And let's go back and talk. Well, you talked about it before, and I cut you off, and I didn't mean to at that point, where you were talking about planning ahead, and you basically say the successful students are those who plan ahead. You don't wait until the last minute to do something. You really need to get a jump, explain your situation, and things will be a lot more successful for you doing it that way.
Yes, exactly, and that's really the whole thing. Every aspect, and whether a student has a disabling condition or not, every student that is trying to achieve a higher education needs to go unprepared. I mean, there are months and years of preparation work that go into it. I mean, students prepare in their academic skills and their reading, writing, arithmetic, and critical thinking skills. And now they also prepare their technology skills so they can access online education and distance education through various learning management softwares, because a lot of these classes are not just traditional, they're blended. And some are hybrid, which means that they have a traditional format where you actually sit in a classroom, but they also have another component, which is part of the distance education component, which is part of the classes online. So students spend years preparing and getting ready for that. But the same preparation is needed to also get into college and get things set up. And that's one of the things you alluded to, Rick, and I'm glad you brought that back up, is that, individuals with disabilities in particular really need to do careful planning, because their accommodations have to be in place, must be in place on day one of the class in order to be successful. And there's some very strong statements that have been made in my text that actually help families and administrators and counselors kind of work through those issues with the students to make sure that these students are going to be successful.
One of the things you really emphasize in the book Accessible College is to be an advocate for yourself. In fact, you talk, I think it's your freshman year in high school, where you really step out and learn to be the one that's going to be advocating for yourself. And when you think about the differences between high school and college, I would think that would be something major. In high school, you've always got your parents, and they know the teachers and maybe school board members. They're familiar with the school. They may have other children go to that school. So it's a little easier to fall back and let them fight your battles for you and make sure the accommodations are what they need. In college, you're pretty much out there by yourself, right? You need to really be your own advocate, because there might not be anybody else out there to do that for you.
Right, exactly right, Rick. And in fact, one of the things I alluded to is this independence. Part of this checklist really is starting really to build our young people into these, independent adults where they can actually function by themselves,
Right.
obviously, and get a feel for not only themselves, working independently in this world, but also get a feel for the college and also learn about people and how people interact with them. Through this process, they will understand that people will have biases. Some people have certain, I won't say attitudes, but there's a different perception of individual disabilities and interacting with them. They'll experience people that may feel uncomfortable with their disabilities. They will experience people that do not want to make an accommodation with their disabilities. And these are life skills that students can learn about people and how to deal with challenging situations in advance. And so this advocacy really is a tool in addition to their education to get their credential to actually prep them for life and job skills.
The book is Accessible College, a guide to transition students with disability from high school to college. Dr. Jeffrey Holmes, our guest on the program, his website, diversitytrainingconsultants.com. Book is available at Amazon. You can link onto our website and get that information as well. You also talk about the ability to explain your needs. How important is that I'm able to, and you start off by basically getting the correct terms, by using the right terms and being able to explain to someone, here's what I need. Here's what I have. Here's what I need.
Yes, what we're finding is that many times, because the student has had a lot of parental involvement, a lot of family involvement, kind of speaking on their behalf and advocating for them, is that when students get to college, they don't know how to express themselves in language is that the professor or the aide or the graduate assistant would even understand. So the student has to get to a point where they can communicate with many different people who have many different listening and learning styles themselves and kind of advocate. For example, on the first day of class, a student may want to talk to the professor about their particular accommodations. Once they find out there's a lot of reading involved, and the student will require a screen reader or require a note taker or require some other assistive technology to help them process the reading in the class. The student would want to make appointments with the professor during their office hours. The student would want to dialogue with that professor and just kind of get a feel for how that class was working. But then also give the professor an opportunity to understand that what their learning needs are and how much time it takes for them to get set up their accommodations so they can do the tasks necessary to do well in the class. And this type of interaction is encouraged by the book. It's also encouraged by many professionals in the field to build these relationships with these professors, ahead of time so that everybody has a comfort level. And so now when the student has an issue, and says, hey, professor, remember I talked to you about such and such? Oh, yes, I remember you. You came the first day of class. I really appreciate, you meeting with me after class. They have this dialogue. Now there's a relationship. And now we get onto the business of learning. So that's what we're looking at. Is really building those relationships of learning to allow the students to be self-advocates, to allow the students to understand their own individual needs and to be able to communicate those needs effectively.
You also talk about verification of disability. Explain that, because I guess we think we just fill out the form and we submit all of that. Is there a time in the process where basically the school is saying, show me, document exactly what it is that we're dealing with here?
Yes, every program is required to have, accommodations for students with disabilities. And because the universities and colleges are spending money towards doing this, they would need verification of any disabling condition. That usually comes from a clinician of some kind, depending on the particular limitation that you would have, a doctor. And they would provide a limitation based on, seeing, hearing, walking, moving, writing, talking, just depends on what the limitation is. And there are so many other limitations that are even talked about, internal disabling conditions, such as, AIDS and cancer, and sometimes the medications that students take during that period of time are also qualify them for receiving accommodations. A lot of people really don't know about. So that's another reason that also prompted me to put together this handbook to allow for people to understand the type of accommodations they could be eligible for to help them through their school.
Got a minute or so left in the program. The book is Accessible College, A Guide to Transition Students with Disability from High School to College. I mentioned clear text. The checklists are so important. You even have a checklist in there, basically a self-quiz, evaluating your readiness for college. And when you think about it, that's very important but I'm sure there's some people that go through this and it's like, maybe I'm not ready for this at this point in my life.
Right, and that happens occasionally. And for every student, I always try to encourage families to not just give on it because you don't think you're ready. Instead of taking a deep dive where you're taking a full 12 to 15 units, right off the bat, why not take one class? Perhaps you didn't want to enroll in that 4-year right away. Well, okay, no problem. Why don't you try a 2-year college? Try a 2-year college, try with one class. Then try with 2 classes, and then try a full load until you're comfortable. The whole thing is to make progress every step of the way. Just don't get discouraged because you think it might be too hard. If you're academically qualified to enroll in that school, then you should enroll and take a program that you'd be interested in and be successful in.
Got about 30 seconds left in the program. You break down student responsibility and institutional responsibility. I mentioned before that you've been mentoring thousands of students over the years, 17 years in post-secondary education. And talking about institutional responsibility, are we seeing positive changes? Do you feel comfortable that we are making sufficient progress?
You know what? I would say that, since the reauthorization of the American with Disabilities Act and also the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, there are a number of changes that have been made to educational codes across the country that have enabled legislators to put in place regulations to help colleges be more motivated to making accessible curriculum, to also upgrading their campuses, to also the professional conversations that are going on with our professor colleagues nationwide to put statements in their syllabi that actually, request for students if they have any issues, not just individuals with disabilities, but any issues to approach the professor, engage with them in conversation and kind of self-advocate. So we are seeing the needle move a lot. One of the things, challenges that we are having, and this is happening more at the community college level more than at the traditional 4-year, is that we're seeing a number of students, not just student with disabilities, but all students that are entering in what's called developmental education, which means that there is a deficiency in their English, math, and possibly critical thinking skills. So what we're trying to encourage students with disabilities in particular to do is to take those preparation tests a little bit earlier. There are some assessments that assess for English and math and critical thinking. Of course, the SAT and ACT tests, and make sure they're really prepared really well for those, because that kind of gives you an insight to where we call it a technical skill that they're going to need to master any of their classes. And there used to be an assumption that individuals with disabilities could get into more vocational education or career technical education. All those courses still require assessments as well. So you're still going to need to be able to critically think. You're still going to need to be able to read. You're still going to need to do mathematics. And that's very important. So for those students, like I said, that, feel like they can't or find that they can't, if they can do those 3 skills and, build up to that level, then they'll be just fine.
The book is an absolute necessity, starting middle school at least, where we talked about in the program with Dr. Holmes, and all the way up through getting into and accepted and going to the first day of class. Dr. Jeffrey Holmes has been our guest on the program. The book is Accessible College, A Guide to Transition Students with Disability from High School to College. It's available very inexpensively, can be downloaded at Amazon. You don't need a Stafford loan to get the book. The book is very inexpensive. It will guide you all the way through. There's the checklist in there, which is so valuable because it's your roadmap to get from here to there. The website is diversitytrainingconsultants.com. And, of course, at our website, we'll pass along all that information as well. Dr. Holmes, thank you. Pleasure having you on the program. Great work and continued success. Thank you.
Rick, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We'll have more coming out in the future to help students access college. Thank you so much.
Great. We will have you back on the program. Dr. Jeffrey Holmes, again, the book is Accessible College, A Guide to Transition Students with Disability from High School to College. You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.